Hello there, good evening and welcome to the Transfer Show. The future of Marcus Rashford continues to dominate the agenda. Have we had the clearest indication yet? He's a step closer to leaving Old Trafford. To talk us through it, I'm joined by Michael Bridge and Mark McAdam. Good evening, gentlemen. To discuss all the latest transfer news, here's a flavour of what's coming up.
I really love my players. I want to keep my players, especially the talented ones.
I know it's going to happen because it's so difficult.
I like Mark for sure. I'd look at it and think, oh dear, I'm not sure you can commit to that because it's such a lot of money.
99 out of 100 times in the end of the window, it's been clear that almost all of these stories weren't true.
Discussing how we can improve the team, always.
We're working on, let's say, two transfers.
For another midfielder is important for us.
I'm not going to answer one question. Don't go in that way.
We need to improve recruitment.
Yeah, plenty happening, but we start with Marcus Rashford. AC Milan have indicated they would make Rashford a key player if he was to join, and they seem to be the front runners for now. Here's what their manager, Sergio Conceição, has said today when asked directly about the Manchester United forward.
You know, there's a question or two that might go slightly off topic, but I'm here to answer or not. Marcus Rashford is an excellent player, just as a number of other players are for other teams and so on and so forth. We'll see what happens.
We'll see what happens, Michael. What's our understanding on the Rashford situation?
Yeah, interesting one and a slight development today, but I feel significant. If United are to allow Rashford to leave, it's understood United are leaning towards a straight loan before reassessing his future in the summer. Adding an option would be considered, but the price would have to be right for United. So that's an interesting one there. We've seen it with loan deals before for Manchester United, seeing how the player gets on. Does the value increase after a good loan move? As you've reported all week, there's been interest from Italy and Spain, and of course, tentative interest from West Ham United.
Yeah, and I mean, Ruben Amorim held his news conference earlier on today, didn't he? It's a small matter of Arsenal away in the FA Cup, but clearly there were questions on transfers and, of course, on Rashford. Always with the FA Cup weekend, but it's the January transfer window. And, of course, we asked Amorim on Rashford.
We will see, guys. Let's focus on the game. They are available. They are training. We will see the selection for this game. They have to focus just in playing the next game.
Yeah, he's not giving much away. He's just focusing on the game, and he's continually being asked about Marcus Rashford is Ruben Amorim. Just on another striker that should Manchester United allow Rashford to leave, there's been lots of talk about Kolo Muani from Paris Saint-Germain. He remains a player of interest, we're told, to Manchester United, but there's been no further contact since they initially inquired about Kolo Muani. They've had a long-standing interest in him, of course, because they scouted extensively in 2023 before they bought Rasmus Højlund. But aside of the fact that United are looking at him, Michael, there are a number of other clubs who'll be interested as well, won't there?
Yes, Damesh, staying in the Premier League, I understand is that Tottenham Hotspur are still interested in Muani. Ange Postecoglou really wants to add another forward to that front three. And a bit of news we're getting this evening that Sky Italy, from our colleague Gianluca Di Marzio, they're reporting that Juventus are convinced they're in pole position to sign Muani. AC Milan, and other club from Serie A, chasing the France international. And Milan say they've not given up on their pursuit of Muani, according to Sky in Italy, but Juve believe they are the front runners. Yeah, because Juve also were looking at Joshua Zirkzee. They're looking at Muani now. Does that leave the door open for AC Milan maybe to go and get Rashford? But aside of Rashford, two other players that have been in the spotlight this week are Kobbie Mainoo and Alejandro Garnacho. And Mark, finally a little bit of clarity from Amorim after a week of speculation on these players.
Yeah, well, Ruben Amorim, the Manchester United boss, speaking to the media today, fending off all sorts of questions with regards to transfers. High on the agenda, like you rightly say, Kobbie Mainoo and Alejandro Garnacho. We said on Wednesday on this very show that they were not for sale and Manchester United were not actively looking to sell them, despite some media speculation and reports that the club were looking at these two players, particularly Kobbie Mainoo, because of the PSR situation and the fact that they have to make sure they meet the financial requirements of the Premier League. Mainoo has a contract until 2027 and Manchester United have a year option on that. Alejandro Garnacho has a contract at Old Trafford until 2028. So they're very much players under contract. Manchester United hold the cards and can do whatever they want with regards to those two players. And Ruben Amorim has been speaking about Mainoo and Alejandro Garnacho in his press conference today. Here's what he said.
My players are always my favorites. So I really love my players. I want to keep my players, especially the talented ones. So, like I said, it's a special moment in this club. It's a hard moment, we'll see. But of course, I'm really happy with Kobe. He's improving, and also with the Garner. I don't remember to say clearly that I want new players. What I said is that sometimes the profile for this system is different. And the players came here with a different idea how to play. What I said is that we need to improve recruitment. When we are targeting players, we need to have sure that they will cope with the demands. Our idea is always to keep the best players and the players that we build for this club. But we know the position that the club is in the moment. We will see, but I'm very happy and I really like our players, especially the guys from the academy.
Yeah, interesting quotes there from Ruben Amorim. Rather more forthcoming on Mainoo and Garnacho compared to what we heard him say about Marcus Rashford. And you mentioned it there, Mark, about the contract for Mainoo up in 2027, an option of a further 12 months. We're told that talks have taken place over a new deal, and the term I've been given is that the lines of communication remain open. So Manchester United, no doubt, will want to reward Kobbie Mainoo for his good performances for the club. So let's go from Manchester United to Manchester City, and we expect them to be busy this month. The club are actively pushing to sign 3 new players. Not that Pep Guardiola was giving too much away.
I know all the month you're going to ask me the same about all you are linking in the media, so I'm not going to talk. So you can insist, I'm not going to answer because I don't know the situation. We know that we should not go to the transfer window. I don't like much. If the situation would happen that season with many injuries and we have to try to do it because the situation that's what it is. So, but what happened, I'm not going to talk because I don't know. I know, of course, I have conversations with the club, but what the process and happen, I don't know what's going to happen because it's so difficult. And it's going to happen. It's going to happen. Otherwise, I cannot say anything else.
Mark, no clues from Pep there on these 3 signings, but what do we know?
Yeah, obviously he wasn't playing ball in the press conference today. Perhaps the league position frustrating the Manchester City boss at the moment. But you can see from the wall behind us, these are the 3 players that Manchester City have been heavily linked with over the course of this January transfer window. We know that they are actively looking to recruit, improve and bolster this Pep Guardiola squad at the moment. Let's start with that man in the middle, Omar Mamouche, 25-year-old Egyptian winger, exceptional figure so far this season, has been linked with clubs in the Premier League, but it's Manchester City that appear to be at the top of that list. Now, there is no deal in place, but it's expected that Manchester City will approach Eintracht Frankfurt over a potential deal. One of the key things which is a real plus for City going into these negotiations, that their information is that Omar Mamouche wants to join Manchester City. He's open to moving to the Premier League in this window. The big question, though, the fee. Eintracht Frankfurt having a really strong season, obviously fighting in Europe as well. They want around 80 million euros, which would be around 67 million pounds. So a very sizable outlay if they were to do a deal. Our information is that Manchester City believe they can negotiate on that price and get something that they're far more comfortable with. So the 67 million pounds is the top end of that price. They believe they can, when they do approach, get something a little bit more favourable. The other 2 players to keep an eye on, both defenders, Abu Kadir Kusanov, Lens defender, 20 years old, very highly rated within Europe, really talented young centre-back. Ready for the Premier League is the big question mark. Sky in Germany are reporting that Manchester City have actually bid £42 million for the defender. But as of yet, there's been no developments. Talks continue between the two clubs. And the other player you can see, which is closest to you, Dharmesh, is the young 18-year-old centre-back, Vita Reese. Now, this is a player that's currently at Palmeiras. On yesterday, we were reporting that talks were continuing between the two clubs, but as of yet, there was no agreement between Manchester City and Palmeiras. He's another exciting player, very young. Is he ready for the Premier League yet? But maybe not. But certainly what you're seeing with these young players, are they just looking at the future? Are they just building? Is this the start of a rebuild at Manchester City?
Yeah, just picking up on that, this is very unlike Manchester City, isn't it? If they buy all of these three players, it could be close to £100 million spend in January. Historically, they don't do much in January, Michael, but Mark alluded to it there. Is this a start, potentially, of a rebuild?
Absolutely. Looking at the three players, I would say Mamouche 100% would come straight into that Manchester City side, in and out of the team. Looking at him with maybe a replacement for Julian Alvarez, the way he plays. Mark talks about the fee there and how, the difference in the fee. Let's remember, when Europe is restarting in a couple of weeks, and that's the first time we're going to see European matches in January. And maybe there's an added value to that as well. Frankfurt doing well in the Europa League. Kujanov, I know for a fact a number of top Premier League sides have continually watched him throughout the season. I think, Mark, you can vouch for me on that one as well, can't you?
Yeah, he's been spoken about with a number of Premier League clubs. And ultimately, these good players playing in Europe, these good players playing in South America, every single Premier League club knows about them. And it's just about who takes the gamble first and which Premier League side is in need of a young centre-back or in need of a winger that can play as a nine. That's where you get those moments. I think the problem for Manchester City is that when they come calling for a player, immediately, A, because they're Manchester City, and B, because they're a Premier League side, the price goes up. And that's the problem. No other sides in Europe can compete with what the Premier League big boys can spend in the transfer market. So as soon as they get that call, they go, hang on, the price that we thought we'd get, we can just add another 10 or 15 or 20 million because we know Premier League sides will pay it because the quality of players just isn't out there at the moment. And when you do get a player of quality, there's very few clubs that can afford him.
Just on Manchester City and their January spend, we've spoken about how rare it is for them to go big in a January transfer window. But if you look historically, they haven't actually done that badly when they've done some deals in January. If you go back to January 2018, they spent £57 million for Aymeric Laporte from Athletic Bilbao. That didn't work out too badly, did it? And then in January 2022, Julian Alvarez joined from River Plate. Admittedly, he went back on loan to River Plate for the rest of the season. But those were two January signings. So if Pep Guardiola was worried, do I need to go into the market in January? He does have a history of, well, actually, it has worked before. Could it yet work again? Definitely one to keep an eye on because it could yet be a big spend for Manchester City in this transfer window. There's a bit of breaking news to bring you just now, and it concerns Brentford, and it's their fullback, Aaron Hickey. He has agreed terms on a new contract until the summer of 2028. It basically means it's an agreement of a 2-year extension on his current deal. He's been out injured since October 2023 with a setback ruling him out of Euro 2024. But he returned to training last summer only to suffer another hamstring injury in August last year. He underwent surgery, but Brentford like him. And they basically said, we see you here for the long term. So they've given him an extension. The Scotland international, of course, joined Brentford in 2022 from Bologna. So good news there for Aaron Hickey and Brentford. Let's go to Chelsea now. And they are still in the market for a defender this month following the injury to Wesley Fofana. Boss Enzo Maresca has admitted he's a fan of the former Chelsea defender Mark Gahey, now, of course, the captain of Crystal Palace.
The only thing I can say, Mark Gahey is Palace player. I like Mark for sure, but he's not our player. But I like also the central defender we have. I also like different kind of central defender that they are in Italy, in Spain, in France, but that doesn't mean that we are going to buy player. So it's just a normal situation, I think, when you are injury, central defender injury, that the speculation are there, but at the same time there is nothing there.
Whenever you ask a question to Enzo Maresca, he answers it straight, doesn't he? But Michael, is Mark Gahey a realistic signing for Chelsea this month?
Can I just add to that what you just said there? He's a dream, I think, for press conferences a lot of the time. He did this in the summer, Darmish, when he talked about Raheem Sterling and players who weren't part of his squad and his thoughts. And he had the questions time and time again. You've got a squad of 35, 40 here. He said, well, yeah, I inherited them. I won about 23, 24. I just admire it. And he was quite open there. And I think in terms of Crystal Palace is that they look at it and say, we don't want to sell our club captain in January. It doesn't give off the best vibe. And also, they're not clear of relegation. And it would cost a lot more to be relegated than get a fee at the moment for Mark Gahey. I must also add that Mark Gahey has made no inclination to anyone at Crystal Palace that he would want to move at the time. We know Newcastle made 3 or 4 bids in the summer. He didn't ask for a move then. But it's an interesting one because when Mark Gahey joined Crystal Palace, Chelsea put in a clause that they could match any bid from another club. Obviously, Chelsea didn't do that in the summer. So it'd be interesting to see how this develops, but I would be surprised if something happened this January.
Mark, when we entered this transfer window and we were talking about Chelsea, all the talk seemed to have been on how many departures there were going to be. Do you think Maresca is still keen to trim his squad in this transfer window?
Yeah, the problem with Enzo being so honest in press conferences is that any potential buying club will come along and say, well, your manager's told everyone that he's open for them to leave. So actually, you want to get rid of these players. Now, a few of those players you mentioned that potentially could be leaving Stamford Bridge over the course of this January window. Ben Chilwell, he said in the press conference today he's going to avoid playing him this weekend because maybe he'll be leaving. The same with Cesare Casadei, exactly the same situation, unlikely to feature over the course of the FA Cup weekend because they don't want to cup tie him. Another interesting player, now this was an Enzo Maresca signing, Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall, 26-year-old, obviously hugely successful with Leicester City, had a brilliant campaign getting promoted from the Championship. Now, Enzo said he has a future. We don't have a loan plan. It has to be right for all parties. So what he's kind of intimating there, if you read between the lines, they don't want to just send him out on loan and then revisit the problem in the summer. They'd be looking more so for a permanent deal, but it has to be right for the player. You get the feeling that probably Enzo wishes he could play Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall a little bit more. Hasn't started a Premier League game so far this season, just 5 substitute appearances in the league. But yeah, Ben Chilwell, Casadei, Dewsbury-Hall, 3 players, all potentially leaving Chelsea this January window. But yeah, that overinflated big transfer budget that was spent on recruiting a lot of players, they're now having to try and sift through and work out the ones that are actually not in favour with the manager.
Yep, not only transfers we're talking about this evening because there's a couple of big games in the FA Cup third round tonight. Wycombe against Portsmouth and also Aston Villa playing host to Graham Potter's West Ham United. And we have the team news for you. Aston Villa have made 3 changes from the team that beat Leicester City in the Premier League on Saturday. Emiliano Martinez is not playing. Olsen is in goal. McGinn misses out tonight, as does Digne. In come Olsen, Ian Maatsen and Morgan Rogers. So the team is Olsen in goal. A back 4, it looks like, of Cash, Konsa, Mings and Maatsen. Morgan Rogers, Tielemans, Leon Bailey, Ross Barkley, Kamara and Ollie Watkins up front. And how about Graham Potter's first team selection for West Ham United? Well, he also makes 3 changes from Julian Lopetegui's last lineup that lost 4-1 to Manchester City on Saturday. Out go Alphonse Areola and Todibo and Vladimir Kufal. In come Lucas Fabianski, Dinos Mavropanos and 19-year-old fullback Oliver Scarles. So the team in full is Fabianski in goal, a back 4 of Wan-Bissaka, Mavropanos, Kilman and Scarles. The 2 midfielders just holding there are Alvarez and Souček, with Kudus, Paqueta, Somerville in behind Nicholas Füllkrug. That kicks off at 8 o'clock. The FA Cup third round, Graham Potter's first game in charge of West Ham United. Can he get off to a winning start? Plenty still to come on the transfer show. Next, we are joined by the former Millwall and Crystal Palace midfielder, Bobby Bowery. Stay with us. Yeah, hello and welcome back to the Transfer Show. Delighted to say we are joined by the former Millwall and Crystal Palace midfielder Bobby Bowery. Bobby, thanks so much for joining us. You're now with the Elite Management Agency. Now, our viewers will know the role of an agent. We've had agents on the show before, but your role is player mentor. Can you just give us an idea of what the day-to-day role is for you?
It's quite a complex role, Dharmesh, if I'm honest with you, in terms of speaking to players, keeping them upbeat, helping them with their game on and off the field, bit of player analysis in terms of watching their games. But the most important thing for me is making sure they're happy. Because nowadays, a lot of the young players that we deal with, they're dealing with a lot of adversity, but also worrying about playing every week, injuries. And it's quite a complex kind of job in terms of managing that kind of side of it, as well as them enjoying playing football, because ultimately it's a job. And these days, the stakes are so high, and you're always looking over your shoulder for the next person to come and take your place, especially as you see now as a business now, football's changed so much. For me, young players now need to make sure they've got, everyone says about resilience, but a consistency in their life in terms of how they act, how they perform, and spotlights on them every single day of the week. And I think that's really tough for me looking on the outside now. I felt that when I was playing football at the time we were playing those years ago, I loved playing football, and it was almost like a dream. Nowadays, the players go in a lot earlier at clubs from the age of, like, say, 6, 7, 8. But also, you think to yourself, the longevity of staying in football is really, really tough these days.
Bob, do you sit the players down? Like, well, obviously no tapes anymore, but like just go through the match 90 minutes and go through their performances individually? Yeah,
that's an interesting question, because for me, the hardest thing is actually not telling the player something different from what the club wants them to do, but actually trying to help them as individuals. So, i.e. a winger, if you see he's not getting enough crosses in, is he attacking the fullback? Is he being positive? Has he got the confidence? So when you clip it back, you can actually show them 4 or 5 clips, which can actually then help them enhance their game.
Just one thing I want to pick you up on, Bobby. In that first answer, you mentioned about when players are playing. What about when you've got young players who are not playing and they've got those frustrations, perhaps when they're in the 18s, they're playing week in, week out, and they're a big part of the setup, and suddenly they take those steps forward and they find themselves out of the team. How do you manage that? How do you deal with that?
That's a great question, Mark. I think due to the size of squads and the size of the amount of players they have, you could be playing in the 18s 1 minute, propelled up to the 21s. Then some boys, as you've known previously, like a Rashford back in the day, came from literally being in school one day, playing in the Premier League, scoring a goal. For me, the hardest thing is how do they take on board the information from the coaches, from their managers, that you have to be patient. And I think a lot of youngsters these days struggle with being patient and waiting their time. I think a key word that no one uses a lot in football is luck. You need luck. You need some luck in your life. And I think once you then earn the right to get that luck as well, your career can go and be kicked on and move on.
Bobby, you mentioned right at the top that one of your biggest jobs is making sure they're happy. Now, mental health is talked about so often in society, but in football as well. Was it actually mentioned when you were playing, and how difficult is it for you to be able to relate to the situations that these young players find themselves in?
For me, the relatability is key, because you have to be almost current in terms of knowing what to say and the right thing to say to these young players, because ultimately their mental health and their happiness is ways more important than their football. You know, we talk about we put it in the categories football, family, finance. At some point in your career, finance will be the driver. But I think for young players, get the football right, making sure you're happy, that will actually help your career further down the road.
And the reason I'm asking about that is because Sky Sports have done a documentary, I'm sure you've seen it, about the academies and how many players from the academy don't actually go on and make it. It's a really, really small number who actually do. It's a big, big issue today, isn't it?
It's probably the biggest issue in football, because every kid on the street wants to be a football player. They all see the bright lights, the money, the cars, the watches, and what they need to realise is, and what needs to be made clear to them, that it's a very long journey, it's a tough journey, and the consistency of being able to be at a top level for 10, 12 years, there's not many players who can actually do that. And I think for me personally, there's been a great clamour for clubs to get more involved in making sure that their players are looked after on and off the field.
Bob, when it comes to transfers, what role do you play specifically?
I would say my biggest thing is making sure they go to the right club that fits them. So let's put the money aside. For me, if I've got a young player whose first things I would look at is he going to play? Because ultimately you want to build your player's career. An example would probably be Alfie Mawson, who Darmish has done an interview with before. We brought him up from going from Brentford, went to Wickham, had bigger clubs, took him to Barnsley, and we took him there because of John Stones and Mason Holgate's story. They pushed on with young defenders. And then we managed to move him to Swansea. Fantastic time, gets into the England squad, and then moves to Fulham. So I think for us, that's the kind of building that player's career is key.
You talk about progression, and naturally, in the role that you have, you want to see players making the right steps at the right time into the right environments. How hard is it for you when perhaps you've got a young player, supremely talented, but the bright lights of the Premier League and a big six club with a lot more money come to the table and say, actually, come to us? How do you convince or advise a player that's got a huge offer with a huge club, but actually you're saying the right thing for you to do is go to this next stage?
That is probably one of the toughest questions I've ever had to ask.
Sorry.
Answer, in all fairness, because the money is probably probably over 50% is the key. But I feel that if you get the move right, the money will come later on in your career, in terms of picking the right club where you're going to go and play, enhance your quality in your football, but also, you know, actually build your career, which is, I think it's a big thing these days.
I'll get done a simpler one now.
Thanks.
I like this, by the way. Tell us the players you deal with individually, if you're allowed.
We've got a really good young lad I'm going to watch tomorrow, hopefully play for Bournemouth, Ben Winterburn. Talented player, Mark will know a little bit about him. Very hard-working, very determined, and he's a great lad to work with. We've got I'm going to Crystal Palace Stockport on Saturday. We look after young centre-half, Ethan Pye, bit of interest in him, left-footed centre-back. We've got some really good young players coming through in terms of not ready yet to go to the big league, but actually really looking actually promising. But for us, it's about managing their expectations. And I think that's what Mark was sort of alluding to. Managing the expectations of your player is probably, and having an honesty and a trust with them.
Bobby, we are pushed for time, so a last quick couple of questions. You're also coaching as well, aren't you? You're the director of the Valencia Academy. Give us an idea how you started that, the kind of players in the setup, and news of a big game that's coming up as well.
Yeah, Valencia Academy is born out from about 12, 15 years, just starting on a Monday night training. We've now moved on to a sixth form programmes running out of Coomwood School in Croydon, the London Nautical City of London Academy School, which is in Waterloo. We've now partnered with Merstham Football Club, which is a step-free football club, and we've managed to, unbelievably, we're playing Chelsea in the fourth round of the FA Youth Cup, a life-changing experience for all of us, and something to be really proud of. My coaching team, we've got people who've got hundreds of football appearances who've been involved with these boys, but for us personally, it's just a case of pitting our wits against an elite football academy, which is going to be a great experience for everyone.
Fantastic. Just one final question then, I guess. With your Palace hat on,
Oh, wow.
Mark Gay, Palace captain, wanted by Chelsea. Can you see that happening in this window?
No. Can't lose him.
No.
Is that important?
I think so, yeah.
Brilliant stuff. Bobby, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
This evening on The Transfer Show. Coming up, we'll bring you news from all 20 clubs in our Premier League wrap. Stay with us.
Hello, good evening. Welcome to The Transfer Show. Time now for your bite-sized roundup from around the Premier League. With 24 days to go, can you believe it, Michael? It's Friday night. Are you ready?
I'm ready, let's go. Right, Kieran Tierney is getting closer to a move back to Celtic from Arsenal. Talks are progressing over a deal that could be a loan or a permanent move, but that would mean Tierney would need to take a pay cut.
Aston Villa have submitted an increased offer for Borussia Dortmund forward Daniel Malen. However, they're still short of Dortmund's valuation of the player. They're also in talks with Fenerbahce, who want to sign Diego Carlos.
Bournemouth head coach Andoni Iraola has confirmed that both Max Aarons and Philip Billing are available to play at the weekend. Well, both have been linked with moves away from the Vitality.
Brentford winger Kevin Schade is a target for Dortmund. Schade is contracted to the club until 2028, and Brentford do not need to sell him.
Well, Brighton have joined Borussia Dortmund in keeping tabs on the Liverpool midfielder Harvey Elliott, who has limited game time this season.
Chelsea head coach Enzo Maresca admits that he likes Crystal Palace defender Mark Gay, but Palace boss Oliver Glasner says no one has asked to leave Selhurst Park.
And Crystal Palace want to make two signings in this window. Those are believed to be Liverpool winger Ben Doak and the Millwall midfielder Romain Esse.
David Moyes is meeting with officials at Everton over return to the club on a 2-year contract. That follows the sacking of Sean Dyche.
Fulham have received an improved offer from Brazilian side Palmeiras for midfielder Andres Pereira.
I told you it was Friday night. Jadon Philogene has passed his medical at Ipswich ahead of a move from Aston Villa. The deal is thought to be worth in excess of £20 million.
Leicester are thought to be limited by financial constraints as they look to make signings that will help them avoid relegation.
Liverpool manager Arne Slot says he hopes Federico Chiesa will still be a Liverpool player in the second half of the season. Chiesa has emerged as a target for Napoli if Kvaratskhelia murdered that, moves to Liverpool or PSG.
Manchester City's latest January target is long defender Abdulkadir Kushinov, according to Sky Germany. They're also pursuing moves for forward Omar Mamouche and centre-back, 18-year-old centre-back Victor Reis.
AC Milan head coach Sergio Conceição admits Marcus Rashford is a player he likes. United are looking for a straight loan, but an option to buy could be added at the right price. It's one to watch.
Well, Newcastle goalkeeper Martin de Bragtha's contract expires in the summer, and Eddie Howe wants him to stay, but there are no developments on a new deal.
Still no movement at Nottingham Forest, who are relaxed about their business in this window. Maybe trimming the squad could be on the agenda.
Well, Southampton have signed defender Joachim Kai-Sander from Valenciennes. The 18-year-old will be on the south coast until 2029.
Tottenham's #1 target in this window is PSG forward Randall Kolo Muani. They also expect to send Alfie Dorrington out on loan.
West Ham are also interested in Manchester United forward Marcus Rashford. However, it is thought he's likely to move abroad.
Now, Wolves head coach Vitor Pereira says he wants another midfielder in this window. That's despite signing Emmanuel Agbadou for £16.6 million yesterday.
Follow that. Now, the potential ins and outs at Manchester United have provided the biggest talking points of the window so far. Our senior reporter, Melissa Reddy, sat down with Stretford Paddock's Adam McCullough and Laurie Whitwell of The Athletic to discuss Marcus Rashford, Kobbie Mainoo and Kolo Muani.
It's something that I'd be really disappointed about. I love Marcus Rashford. Been a big fan of him during his time at Manchester United. Obviously being an academy boy as well. I didn't ever think we'd see him in another shirt apart from a Manchester United shirt.
I think he's 13th in the all-time scorers chart for United, which at 27 is pretty remarkable. That being said, I still come down on the point of you've got to have your own responsibility in all this. Clearly, Ruben Amorim's come in and has made a pretty quick decision about what he's seeing on the training pitches and then what he is being told away from the pitch.
Kobbie Mainoo, Alejandro Garnacho, United aren't going to sell them.
I think they'd be riots at Old Trafford if they tried to sell Kobbie Mainoo. It feels like something where the club are maybe trying to get into a position where we're not just going to be giving out contracts. So if you want to be here, kind of A, have to earn your contract, and B, like, try and fight for your position to be here. If you sell Kobbie Mainoo, try and replace him now. Yeah. How much money is that going to take? Because you're going to have to give out a big contract and you're going to have to give out a big transfer fee.
In that equation.
Like, you're not going to be able to replace him with someone as good as him.
And they've made inquiries over Randall Kolo Muani, who we'll all remember from the summer of 2023. He was on their shortlist, along with Rasmus Højlund, who they eventually got.
They were crying out for a centre forward. You know, I mean, Erik ten Hag wanted an established one. He wanted Harry Kane, basically. United couldn't afford it. If it's a short-term loan and it's to counter the fact if Rashford goes, but here you've got a player that, you know, ideally wants to be at United and can have more synergy with the manager, then I think that's a fine temporary solution. I suppose it's not ideal if you're kind of going long-term, like more significantly for players that you kind of discounted almost a couple of years prior.
From United to Liverpool we go, and Liverpool manager Arne Slot has distanced himself from suggestions the club are in the market for Napoli forward Kvaratskhelia Kvaratskhelia.
We are linked with Kvaratskhelia. What I make of that is that it's January, and I think I said it after the West Ham game, that don't disappoint me. Please come up with all these clubs and all these players that are in the interest from us, or the ones that don't play a lot for us going to go somewhere else. Yeah, that's what's happening now. And 9 out of 10 times, 99 out of 100 times in the end of the window, it's been clear that almost all of these stories weren't true.
Very, very cautious response there from Arne Slot. I'm going to do a run-up, and so I'll say his name again so you don't have to. So what do we know about Kvaratskhelia?
I know his nickname is Scaradonna, which I prefer a lot more. Yeah, this is one to keep an eye on. We know that Liverpool are just actively monitoring the window at the moment. There has been this link to the Georgian winger, 23-year-old. You can see him there at Napoli, 5 goals and 3 assists. We know that there is interest, but no formal communication between the two clubs at this stage. Liverpool relaxed about their movements in this window.
Michael, behind me, we can see 2 other players at Liverpool, Harvey Elliott and Federico Chiesa. Slot also spoke about their futures today, didn't he?
Yeah, I mean, look, at the start of the season, I thought Harvey Elliott was going to play quite a big part of this new era of Liverpool. But Slot said, look, Harvey Elliott's been unlucky, got injured. It's not easy to come back to your best. We have to balance game time to get him back to his best and make sure the team... and a balance between winning the game as well. So he also talked about Chiesa, but the key he said as well, which was the best bit for me, was the second season in any season is more important than the first. And, of course, they're still in 4 competitions, doing brilliant in the league, brilliant in the Champions League, aren't they? The FA Cup starts tomorrow for them. The Carabao Cup, they don't need to win the Carabao Cup, do they, this year, do they? They've got enough to worry about.
Yeah,
Try telling that to Arne Slot.
Yeah, let's see about that. Aston Villa, of course, in FA Cup third-round action tonight against Graham Potter's West Ham United. That's what we call them now, Graham Potter's West Ham United.
Yeah,
but some lines coming out from Aston Villa, close to bringing in a forward, Mark.
Yeah, this came to us just before we went on air, actually. Aston Villa have increased their offer for Borussia Dortmund forward Donyell Malen. Arsenal fans might recognise the name. The club are getting closer to Dortmund's valuation of the player as negotiations continue. One source has told us Villa's latest offer is around £21 million, around 25 million euros. Borussia Dortmund are demanding close to €30 million, which is a 25 million pounds. So there's not a lot of difference between what Aston Villa are at the moment and what Dortmund want. He was an Arsenal under-18 and under-21 player, didn't make any senior appearances, right winger, left winger, also played as a 9, so he brings versatility.
Yeah, so Villa trying to get Donyell Malen at Villa Park. One player who is on his way out and imminently on his way out is Jadon Philogene, of course. He's passed his medical at Ipswich Town. It's a deal worth over £20 million, including performance-related add-ons. He's agreed a 4.5-year contract. An announcement on that was expected today, but there's a lot of paperwork to do on this deal. So it could just be slightly delayed, but we're told that there are no issues. But aside of Philogene, there could be another outgoing, Michael.
Yeah, an interesting one here. Jose Mourinho's Fenerbahce making some progress in talks to sign Diego Carlos from Aston Villa. Now, talks have been over a £10 million deal. And it was quite an exciting signing for Aston Villa, wasn't it, at the time? But then he got that injury. But we understand Villa are prepared to listen to offers for Diego Carlos. It's Fenerbahce making progress on a potential signing for Diego Carlos.
Michael, don't go anywhere. We've still got one more part to go, because coming up we'll hear from Mikel Arteta as one of his players edges towards an exit to his former club. Welcome back to the Transfer Show. Time to rattle through even a few more stories. Nottingham Forest, of course, doing so well in the Premier League so far this season, fighting for a top 4 place, but they're looking like they're looking to offload a few players. Mark.
Yeah, me and Michael said it in the wrap, looking to just try and trim the squad down a little bit, and Nottingham Forest are open to offers for Emmanuel Dennis, Lewis O'Brien, Harry Toffolo and Andrew Omobamidele. Forest would be willing to listen to proposals for loan or permanent deals O'Brien, of course, currently on loan at MLS side Los Angeles FC, while Toffolo and Omar Bamadeli are struggling for game time. Dennis has not played once this season for Forest since returning from his loan at Watford in the summer. So, yeah, interesting news there. High-flying Nottingham Forest.
Yeah, from third place Nottingham Forest to second place Arsenal. And Mikel Arteta says there's a possibility Arsenal could make a signing this month in the forward areas due to injuries, but he admits they might not be able to afford their targets.
We always have discussions with the ones above, discussing how we can improve the team, always, whether it is the market is open or closed, because we have to plan for what the necessities are right now and what the necessities are mid and long term. The circumstances change because we have certain injuries of some big players, so there's always a possibility, but always if we believe that it's somebody that really is going to make us much better. Because we have certain limitations and we have a lot of gaps and a lot of things to cover to become the team that we want. And then the availability of those players, can you afford them as well, even if you want to? And sometimes being not possible.
Yeah, those are thoughts of Mikel Arteta on potential arrivals at the Emirates. But Mark, what's the latest on a potential departure?
Yeah, this one won't come as a surprise. Kieran Tierney, a lot of injury problems, unfortunately. Talks progressing between Arsenal and Celtic. The player is willing to take a pay cut to rejoin his boyhood club. Talks continue over the course of this weekend. Maybe something that will happen later in the window. Just important to point out as well that because of the new format Champions League and the fact that Celtic have their final group game on the 29th of January against Aston Villa, any players signed wouldn't be able to play in the Champions League. He could only be registered from February onwards.
Interesting. So it could be a timing thing. So one to watch out for towards the end of the transfer window. Staying in Scotland, and we go from Celtic to Rangers, Michael, and they're looking to offload a striker perhaps this month.
Yes, Cyril Dessers, we understand Rangers are open to selling him. There's interest from Serie A sides Cagliari and Empoli, and I'm sure Rangers fans will agree that might be best for all parties.
Right, interesting stuff. Newcastle United in great form at the moment. Eddie Howe held his news conference ahead of their cup tie this weekend and talked about how good Alexander Isak was and up there with one of his best signings. He also spoke quite glowingly about Martin Dubravka, didn't he? But is he leaving St James's Park, Mark?
This is bizarre. Newcastle's main goalkeeper at the moment, he's kept 5 clean sheets in his last 7 games. The last time Nick Pope played was December the 7th. So Dubravka, very much a big part of it. Yes, he's 35 years old. Yes, he's out of contract in the summer. However, no chance as far as Eddie Howe's concerned. He does not want to lose Martin Dubravka. Big part of what they're doing at the moment and a key player for Eddie Howe.
Michael, very, very quickly, we've got Mark Gahey. We're talking about him potential leaving, but Palace won't want to do that. Any incomings that you can warm the hearts of Palace fans with?
I always like warming the hearts of Crystal Palace supporters, you know that, Dharmesh, and I'll warm them a little bit more. I'm confident they'll probably bring in Romain Esse from Millwall potentially over the next few days. Negotiations are continuing, but a source tells me there's confidence that this could get done. He's a great lad, fantastic player. Millwall fans absolutely love him, but I don't think they'll begrudge him a move if they get the money they want.
Fantastic stuff. Mark McAdam, Michael Bridge, it's been an absolute pleasure, and Bobby Barry was fantastic. I'm sure you will agree. Well, our transfer window coverage returns on Monday, and that's starting with Good Morning Transfers. That's at 9 a.m. If that's too early for you, we have Transfer Talk at midday. And, of course, we round out the day with the Transfer Show at 5 p.m. and 7 p.m. We'll see you then.